Did you know that United Healthcare helps connect you to doctors and therapists with 24/7 access to virtual care?
So I could have therapy from my couch?
Yep.
Or a doctor appointment from my car?
If you wanted to.
Wait, you're right. I don't even like when people see me sing in the car. Couch appointment it is.
Virtual visits are just one of the ways United Healthcare helps connect you to better health. Learn more at uhc.com. Plan benefits may vary.
High fly ball into deep left center. It's at the wall. Gone! Dylan Carlson, home run number 17. His 52nd extra base hit in his rookie season to tie Stan the Man and what he did in his rookie. Carlson hits it into deep right and his second home run. Dylan Carlson, home run number 18. He's homered from both sides of the plate. What a talent.
Big time day for Dylan Carlson, the rookie, passed Stan Musial for the most extra base hits in a rookie season by any Cardinal ever. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. Dylan Carlson is the type of X factor that the Cardinals are going to need in October. The postseason's probably going to come down to what you get out of the 2 through 4 hitters. What you get out of Goldie, Arenado, and O'Neill. Those 3 guys are your 3 most important hitters in the postseason, just the same as they were in the regular season. But you need more than that. Just like to win 17 straight games, you needed basically your entire 26-man roster. In order to go on a run in the postseason, you're going to need pretty close to your entire 26-man roster. And Alex, one of the most important pieces to all of that is Dylan Carlson, the rookie outfielder, who in his last 25 games is now slugging over 500, and in his last 8 games has 2 doubles, a triple, and 3 home runs. This is the way that you'd want to see him playing going into the postseason.
Am I allowed to pump T-Bone and I's horn a little bit here?
Pump our horn.
Can we toot a little bit here? Because when you were out, T-Bone and I did say 2 guys that are going to be important for this run are going to be Tommy Edman and Dylan Carlson. And lo and behold, those 2 guys found a way to turn it on. Now, look, they weren't the most important players because you still needed Paul Goldschmidt to be MVP.
Some people here may say John Lester. I'm not going to say who, but some.
I'd like to know who that is. Is it?
Was John Lester not important down the stretch? Was he not? Is John Lester not in play to start game 1 of the NLDS?
I mean, look. Okay.
He was pretty important down the stretch, I would say.
Sure, if you want to go that route. But regardless, you still needed your big 3. But Tommy Edman and Dylan Carlson were crucial, and more so Dylan Carlson in these last few games. And I'm really looking at yesterday because we talked about it. You don't want to lose a game and then get back into that old habit, right, of wondering where the offense is going to come from. Dylan Carlson comes through for this team. I think it says a lot about this Cardinals team because I can go through a list of 6, 7, 8 different X factors for a 1-game wild card or an NLDS. But you're right.
Or the World Series.
Let's get past the NLDS first, buddy. Let's get past the wild card first, buddy.
It's a foregone conclusion for some
is
of
it?
us.
Sorry, I forgot. I forgot we put money down on it.
That was the ultimate BKO. We're
No.
Is there a song for BKOs? Maybe we should come up with one.
Nope, we don't need to
We
do
should
that.
play John
Not a thing.
Cena's. I don't remember what it's called.
Did you say John Cena's?
That's going to be my song.
That's his song?
Yeah, here comes the BKO
song. Look, regardless, though, Carlson could
it's
be...
the Stone Cold Steve Austin introductory.
No, that is not it at all.
The crash.
It's the glass breaking.
Yeah.
It's not a crash.
Well, yes. Cool.
I don't even know where I'm at anymore. He's singing songs from John Cena, and I'm like, where's that even coming from, T-Bone? Dylan Carlson can be the X Factor, but I think there's 6 or 7 other guys that can be X Factors for this team because that's the uphill battle that they have in a 1-game wild card.
Yeah, Carlson can be the X factor, and the thing that's so great about him is the switch hitting ability, and And you can't really match up with him very well. And he looks comfortable from both sides. Sure, the numbers show that he's better on one side than the other, but you expect that from a switch hitter. But he looks comfortable on both sides. So that's why I kind of view him as the X factor. Is you can't really match up with him. You can go to a lefty, but then you can't really get left on left, and he handles both sides of the plate pretty well. He homered yesterday from both the right and left. He's the first rookie in NL American League history to, I believe it's hit a home run from both sides of the plate in 2 games, which is really impressive.
Yeah, that's an amazing statistic. He's one of the guys that I'm watching. What?
What, you weren't impressed?
No, the way you said it. Wow. That's an amazing statistic.
I'm serious.
Fair, he already heard
that's
it.
No, that's legitimately unbelievable that I had not heard that. It
was just
took
the
me by
excitement
surprise.
that you had behind it. Wow. That's an amazing statistic.
It kind of felt like one of these.
Take 2.
Wow, T-Bone, that's an amazing statistic.
Take 2. T-Bone, that's unbelievable. I had never heard that. That's one of the most improbable, incredible things I've ever heard. Dylan Carlson did something that's never been done before. That's amazing. All right, he's one of the guys that I'm watching for coming up this weekend. There are others, though, Alex. And you mentioned, yeah, there are a lot of questions that we still need answered. This is kind of wild that the Cardinals have now been secured, clinched their playoff berth for 5 games, or the 5 games prior to the postseason. And yet there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered in terms of who's going to be on the roster for the postseason and what their roles are going to be once they get there. So Michael Gersh was asked on Bally Sports Midwest prior to the game yesterday about a couple of those guys, in particular, Jack Flaherty and Dakota Hudson. What are their roles going to be going into the playoffs?
He has experience pitching out of the bullpen, though he hasn't, as part of the rehab from Tommy John, he has not done back-to-back games or anything like that. So similarly, we're going to probably try to keep him stretched out here. He'll likely have a role in the playoffs, but it depends on how things go and what things look like. And that wild card roster, you can set a roster for only 1 game, which is very different than setting a roster for a series. So who's on which roster and how that all plays out. It's sort of weird to not really know 5 days before the season ends, but we're just at a point where we got a lot of balls in the air to sort through.
So tonight, you've got Dakota Hudson on the mound as your starter, and he's somebody that I'm really honing in on. I said earlier today on the Danny Mac show, Alex, I think there are 2 scenarios that you could see Dakota Hudson in the early portions of the postseason for the Cardinals. Option 1, he's a guy that piggybacks Adam Wainwright. If Waino is not as good as you expect him to be in the wild card round, you could see Dakota Hudson come in the 3rd or 4th inning, give you a couple of strong innings of work, and then pitch again in the NLDS. But I think that's option 1. Scenario 2, you don't end up needing him for the wild card game. He's available, but not needed. Waino gives you a good start. You get to the back end of your bullpen. Boom, you're ready to go to the NLDS. I could see a scenario in which Hudson is starting game 1 or 2 of the NLDS. I really could. He's been that good for you so far. And as a ground ball pitcher, he's the type of guy that I would want on the mound. So Dakota Hudson, we mentioned it for Dylan Carlson, he's also an X factor. To get a guy like this back, who you've said all year, you think he could be their legit number 2 starter, it's kind of been that since he's returned from the injured list. He's a guy that I think could have a huge contribution to what the Cardinals do, both in the wild card game and then into the NLDS.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued of what they're going to use him as, because I don't know if I would use him as a starter, at least at the beginning. Like, I think I'd still go John Lester as my number 2, number 1 starter in the NLDS if you get there. Dakota Hudson, and look, he could be used in any role, but I think he's going to be so useful out of the bullpen for you. Because if you get into a jam, and when we spoke with yesterday, who am I blanking on?
Brian Price.
Thank you. Brain fart. Sorry.
It's cool, man.
Quick morning. When he talked yesterday about how that first inning's the toughest inning to get through. And if you get shellacked in the first inning where you've given up 2 runs and you got 2 guys on, I think I'd be going to Dakota Hudson before anybody else in my bullpen, because he could get out of that jam and then he could give you 2 or 3 more innings to kind of get you back on track. So as much as I would love to see Dakota Hudson start for me in the NLDS, I think I would stick with him as a bullpen guy, because he is just my break glass in case of emergencies piece.
I think I've got my 4-man rotation set at this point. And you can determine where you want these guys to be figured out. 2 through 4 is basically interchangeable in terms of the ranking, for me at least. But I think my 4 guys would be Waino, Michaelis, Hudson, and Lester. I think that would be my 4-man rotation going into the postseason. And then you can work your way around depending on matchups, who you like to be where. But I think I'd be starting Dakota Hudson in the postseason, depending on if he's needed. I would use him out of the bullpen in the wild card game if you need him in that spot. And then maybe that changes some things, and maybe he's coming out of the bullpen in the NLDS. But if you don't need him in that wild card game, I do think he, for me, would be one of my starters in the NLDS.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. If I need him in the wildcard game, I'll go to him. If not, I want him to be a starter in the NLDS. I think he's maybe my fourth starter in the NLDS, so maybe Game 3 or Game 4 is kind of in that area where I'm looking for him. I am very curious to see what he looks like tonight because he's on a pitch limit. 70 to 75 is what it sounds like the Cardinals are going to shoot for Dakota Hudson. So I want to know how efficient he is. I think that's going to be a big factor tonight to determine what they're going to do with him heading into the postseason is how efficient can he be. Only 70, 75 pitches. Can he give us a solid? You probably only need 4 or 5 innings in the postseason from him, even tonight. 4 or 5 innings because you got most of your guys pretty much available, I'd say. So I'm very curious to see what he is tonight, but I think he is a starter moving forward.
So the other question for the weekend is the injury questions about Yadier Molina and Edmundo Sosa. Are those guys going to be at or near 100% when you get to the wild card game 5 days from now? Here's what Michael Gersh had to say yesterday with an update on Bally Sports Midwest.
Sosa and Yadi look like they should be fine and getting games sometime over the weekend. And as long as they can get in a game, get some at-bats, and feel good about it, they got a couple days then off, Monday and Tuesday. So we expect them to be available on Wednesday. But until they actually go out there and participate and actually, play a game and come in the next morning and say, yeah, I feel like I can play again today, until we have that for certain, there's a little uncertainty there.
I'm hopeful. I'm cautiously optimistic, Alex. I think Yadi's going to be fine. We know he's a gamer. He's going to be out there. And I'm not saying Edmundo Sosa's not, but Yadi's injury has been designated as like a sore shoulder. He was scratched right before a game. They thought he could go, and then they were probably like, you know what, let's be cautious with this. There's no reason to push him when we've already clinched. Sosa's is different. When he got hit in the hand, I thought he was done for the year. I thought that was going to be a fracture, and we would not see Edmundo Sosa again for the Cardinals after that Friday day game out at Wrigley. I don't know what to expect from him this weekend. But those are the two biggest questions for me, position player-wise, going into the weekend is, what are you able to get out of Yadi? And what are you able to get out of Edmundo Sosa? I'm really hopeful that they can get at least 2 starts out of both of them in this 3-game series against Chicago.
Yeah, I think for Yadi, I'm with you. I'm not concerned. Yadi doesn't need to swing the bat for me to be like, oh, he's not ready to play. Like, when he's ready, and he'll be Yadi. Edmundo Sosa's the one that if I don't see him at all this weekend, which they've said we're going to, but if I don't see him at all, it's hard for me to believe he's going to be available Wednesday for you. And I know he could hit in BP and, he could hit in the cages. And
he's got to play. He has to play this
He's got
weekend.
to face real-life pitching from an opponent before I can sit here and be like, yeah, Edmundo Sosa's playing Wednesday. Because if he doesn't, I'm not starting him Wednesday.
Well, no. The expectation is he's going to play this weekend, and then the question is, how does he respond to that,
I need to see him in back-to-back games. That way I could kind of tell how he responds. But if it's whether it's Saturday, Sunday, or tonight and tomorrow, that's how I want to see Edmundo Sosa. Even if that way he can kind of get timing back too. If he plays Friday and then he plays Sunday, then things get a little more difficult for me to decide. If he's only in one game, say he plays Sunday, to me you got to turn to Paul DeJong, unless Sosa looks incredible in his one game.
Last series of the season, Cardinals versus Cubs here in St. Louis. You've got Dakota Hudson on the mound getting the start tonight. John Lester is your announced starter for tomorrow. He's another big guy that I'm going to be watching closely. He was hurt, I wouldn't say injured, hurt in his last start. So let's see how effective he is tomorrow against the Cubs, and then a Sunday day game with Jake Woodford on the mound for the Cardinals before they get set for the postseason. And we will have all of the reaction on Monday morning right here on 101 ESPN. We'll be covering everything throughout the day here today as well. It is 11:15. Your time check brought to you by Clarkson Jewelers, an officially licensed Rolex jeweler. The Cardinals have announced a press conference for 2 o'clock. We do not know what that press conference is for.
I enjoy a good mystery.
If I had to speculate, I would guess that it is related to Adam Wainwright's contractual status. He's a free agent at the end of the year. He has said he's going to pitch next year. The Cardinals have said publicly and privately that they are confident they can get that done and that the negotiations will not be difficult. So if I had to guess leading into the final weekend, that would be what makes the most sense. But we'll try to find out more about that throughout the day today. And if we hear anything, we will let you know what the latest update is. Coming up next, though, speaking of contracts, is Luis Garcia a guy that you're going to want to keep around long term? We'll talk about that next on 101 ESPN.
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Finally set. Can he end it here? Swing and a miss. Ball gets away from Kisner. He'll tag Wong, and the Cardinals take 2 of 3.
That was Luis Garcia's final pitch last night. The Cardinals are now in a good spot with Luis Garcia because in his last 30 games, opposing hitters are batting just 171 against him. That is good for a 1.15 ERA in that 30-game stretch. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. Alex, Luis Garcia is making himself some money this year because he is a guy that in his career has had some ups and downs. And for the majority of his career, it's been more downs than ups, honestly. But he ditched the four-seam fastball. He went to a sinker ball. He's throwing at 98 to 100 miles per hour. And now you look at him as a 35-year-old pitcher next year. He is exactly what a whole heck of a lot of teams could use at the back end of their bullpen. What do you think his future is? First of all, in the postseason, he's going to be a huge weapon for what the Cardinals are trying to accomplish. But moving forward from there, is he the type of guy that you would want to re-sign if you're the Cardinals going into next season?
No, he's not. Because I think he's outpriced himself already for this Cardinals team. For the age and for what he's done this season, I think it's a one-and-done type of year for Luis Garcia. I mean, you're 35 years old. He's been a phenomenal pickup for this team, BK. But on top of it, what he has done since that blow-up against the Chicago Cubs, you also look at it and think he's thinking, I'm 35 years old. I'm not going to get a better payday than what I'm going to be getting with this upcoming offseason. And I think the Cardinals showed their success with finding Luis Garcia, right? Like, you can find these guys for pretty cheap. So, I mean, if we're talking $1 million for Luis Garcia, yeah, I'd bring him back. But if we're talking anything more than that, I don't think I'm bringing him back.
Tanner, is Luis Garcia a guy that you would be interested in bringing back next year?
I would be. At the right price for a one-year deal, I'd be interested in bringing him back just because he's been effective here in St. Louis. And to me, I know if you look at his career, he's been inconsistent. You look at the past, and there's some bad, there's some good. But to me, if there's a guy that's had success here in St. Louis and behind this defense, I think he just fits perfectly. And for some reason, it clicked here in St. Louis, and I don't think that would change heading into next year. So I would be willing to bring him back.
I would want him back, but I would specifically want him back on a one-year deal. And I would want him back on something less than $5 million. If that's what you're able to get him for, I'm in. Sign me up. I'm down for that. Anything more than that, though, and I'm out. Because 2021 Luis Garcia, the guy that we've watched this year, is why I'm not paying 2022 Luis Garcia. You can find these guys, as Alex mentioned. And you've got to make some tweaks. You've got to bet on the talent, and you've got to work really hard to find them. You've got to churn through that talent, both in the minors and in the big leagues. But Luis Garcia was not a good player before he got to St. Louis. He was cut by the Yankees from their AAA team. They deemed him to have zero value, both to their AAA squad and their Major League squad. Well, the Cardinals made an adjustment. They went from him throwing about 40% four-seam fastballs to about 60% sinker balls. He completely ditched the four-seamer, which was getting crushed by opposing hitters. And now opposing hitters are batting just .210 against a sinker. They can't hit it. He's been really effective with it this year. They were batting .350 against his four-seam. Well, that seems pretty obvious. Let's get rid of that. Let's use the sinker that you're throwing 98 to 100 miles an hour, and let's see if you can get some ground balls in front of this defense. It's worked. Next year, in front of this defense, they could find somebody else that throws a heavy sinker, that is able to get a lot of ground balls, and in front of this defense in particular, they're going to be super effective. So if he's going to cost a ton of money, if somebody's going to overpay for 35-year-old version of Luis Garcia, I'm good with letting him walk. But if he's going to come in under that $5 million and he's like, you know what, I'm 35, I've got a great defense behind me, I'm in a really good situation with coaches that helped me get to the best form that I've been at any point in my career, then yeah, he's the type of guy that I would definitely want around next year. But it's going to come down to what he's looking for in the offseason.
It's not just Luis Garcia, the sample size of knowing that the Cardinals can do this without having to pay a lot for pitchers. It's the other guys. It's TJ McFarland, it's Wade LeBlanc, it's Jay Happ, it's John Lester. You can find cheap options on the market without having to pay somebody for a awesome year. What this really reminds me of is Pat Neshek when he signed with the Cardinals and he had that great year and then got the big payday and went elsewhere and struggled. Same with Edward Mojica with the Cardinals here. Like, he had 2013 where he was unreal, went to Boston, got paid, and struggled. So I just don't think you want to get into a situation where you pay a guy for what he's done in half of a season and say, man, he's a part of our future. I think the future for the Cardinals bullpen is find guys who can throw strikes for cheap with this defense behind you.
Yeah, that's the thing. What you're describing, Alex, is just relievers. Like, relievers break, and relievers go up and down and up and down. Greg Holland was the best reliever in baseball. Then he signed with the Cardinals. He stunk for 3 months, and then he became a really good reliever again. And then he started going through the downward cycle. Wade Davis was unhittable in those runs by the Royals in 2014 and 2015. And then he went out to Colorado and became one of the least effective relievers in the game. This happens a lot. We can look at it right now. Look at the Cardinals bullpen. They signed Andrew Miller for the role that TJ McFarland is currently filling for them. TJ McFarland is what they wanted Andrew Miller to be. And they paid Andrew Miller, $9 million per year over a multi-year contract as a reliever to be that guy? That's why you don't sign those players in your bullpen. So if you're going to get him, and we've got a few texts. 65780 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. We've got a few texts that are saying he won't re-sign for anything less than a 1-year deal. If that is the case, then you don't need to re-sign him. Like, Luis Garcia is a good player, a good pitcher that has changed things around, and he has found something for him. But if he's going to be a multi-year contract at $5+ million per year, I wish him all the success in the world elsewhere. That's not the type of guy that I think that this team needs to re-sign, especially when you're potentially going to get Jordan Hicks back next year. If Jordan Hicks can be himself again next season, well, then what you're looking at is basically next year's version of Luis Garcia, and he's currently on the roster for cheap.
I think my range for him would be 1 year, $5 to $8 million. I think that's about where I would go.
You'd be willing to go that high? Wow.
I think so. I just think he'd be so effective here in St. Louis still. I understand the point of, Pat Neshek, he went elsewhere and he struggled. I just think for some reason here it's clicked, and I think it will continue to click for another year, and that's why I'm willing to do it. And my pushback is I agree you can always find these guys, but there's a lot of teams that have tried this too, and it hasn't worked. Look at the Philadelphia Phillies. They tried to fix their bullpen. They couldn't do it, and they tried it at the deadline too. So, and I don't want to rely on Jordan Hicks either coming out of the pen. Same with kind of Alex Reyes, because I don't know if he's going to be a starter or not. So I would be willing to bring him back for one. That's probably why my range is a little higher, up to that $8 million. But I think I understand the point of you can find these guys, but I think it's a lot harder than the Cardinals front office made it seem to be this year.
I think if I'm paying somebody $5 to $8 million, I'm going to look for somebody who's got a little bit better of a track record than Luis Garcia. For that amount of money, I need somebody whose baseball card has done it on a consistent basis rather than just half of a season with a team.
I will say, we've seen him do it here, and there's value in that. You've seen him specifically do it with this coaching staff. He responded well and in front of this defense, and there's value in that. But you're also getting Ryan Helsley back, potentially, you would assume, next year as well.
And if Cody Whitley stays healthy, he's a full season for you.
Yeah, Whitley, Helsley, you've got Gallegos, Cabrera, and Reyes if he ends up back in the bullpen. We'll see on Jordan Hicks. It's a good point, Tanner. You don't want to count on something that you don't know if he's going to be back or not. But this team has Angel Rondon, who they're pretty high on down in the minors. They've got a couple other fireballers that we could see maybe next year. You're getting up in numbers in terms of the number of players that could potentially help you from the back end of the bullpen. Again, I like Luis Garcia. I would like to see him back next year, and he's going to be a huge piece of what they're trying to do in the postseason. But if he's going to cost a lot of money, if you're talking $5 to $8 million, especially if it's a multi-year deal, that's something that I would balk at, and I would let him go elsewhere.
Cardinals press conference today is probably going to be Luis Garcia 5x5 extension. Hey, we're signing Luis Garcia to a 5-year, $25 million contract.
That's Alex Ferrario. He's Tanner Hendricks, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, 65780 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. But coming up next, Ned Yost was the manager for the Royals when they went to the 2014 wild card game. What was the process process of preparing for that game? How do you prepare for it as a manager? And does he agree that this Cardinals team reminds him a little bit of that 2014 team? We'll ask Ned Yost, the former Royals manager, next on 101 ESPN.
We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
He's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Former Royals and Brewers manager Ned Yost joining us now via the Brown and Crouppen Celebrity Line. He did manage the Royals in that memorable 2014 wild card game. He managed them for the 2015 World Series champion Royals as well. Ned joining us now on 101 ESPN. Ned, we appreciate the time. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you guys? Exciting time in St. Louis, I know.
Man, to say the least, it's been incredible to watch. Ned, I'm from Kansas City, and I was in KC in that 2014 run that you guys went on, especially in the second half. I remember for a lot of fans, they were frustrated by the lack of trades at the deadline, and then that memorable run took place all the way into the World Series. Does this remind you what we're watching right now in St. Louis? Does it remind you at all what you guys were able to do in 2014?
A little bit, it's just a real exciting time. And, it went from, I think, some frustration in St. Louis. You could tell, as a matter of fact, I think you guys wanted me to come on the show about a month ago or 6 weeks ago, wanting to know when a team looks like they're about to turn around. And, that's hard to tell, but when you have talent like you have on that team, when you've got outstanding manager, outstanding coaches, that sooner or later that talent's going to rise to the top. And there was a lot of frustration there early, but the last 3 weeks, the last month, it's been unbelievable. The winning streak that they put together to get them into the wild card and then to get them to clinch the wild card. It's all kind of the same. The excitement that's generated is all the same, and this is a great time of year. This is a time where, you go into spring training looking for this time of the year. You want to be in these situations. You want to be in the playoffs because that's where, it's tremendously exciting, not only for the team, but for the city too.
Ned, the Cardinals have 3 more games before this wild card starts up on Wednesday. From a manager's perspective, you've been in this position before. How do you keep your guys engaged in the final few games before that actual wild card games begin? Because you want to make sure that they're ready to go when that wild card starts.
Yeah, and they will be. For us, I think in 15, it was a little bit tougher because, we had gone to the World Series in 14 and we fought, right? I mean, when we went in 14, we didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't know if we were going to be the second wild card. We didn't know if we were going to be the first wild card, which had home field advantage. We didn't know if we were going to win our division. We ended up losing the division by 1 game at the end. So, we were looking at all these different scenarios. But in 15, when we won, our team was tremendously confident. And going into the last 3 games in Minnesota, these guys kind of wanted to get playoff geared. But my mindset was, hey, I want home field advantage because we were going to play Toronto. And I didn't want to go to Toronto 4 times. I wanted to play Toronto 3 times up there, 1 trip, not 2. So to try to, maintain that focus was, it was a little bit tougher to do because they were chomping at the bit. They wanted those playoffs to start. But, they played it out to the end, and we ended up winning home field advantage, and the rest is kind of history. Went on a great run to win the World Championship.
Ned Yost, former Royals and Brewers manager, joining us here on 101 ESPN, 2015 World Series champion. And Ned, when you're in this spot and you're preparing for that wild card game scenario like you did back in 2014, what are some of the conversations that are taking place with the coaching staff, especially regarding pitching? Because that game is just so much different. It's 1 game, and you're able to winner goes home or winner goes on, loser goes home. What are the conversations leading up to that game like when it comes to the pitching decisions that you could potentially have to make?
We started talking about the different scenarios that we were going to have to face about a month out. So, I mean, we would have 5 or 6 conversations a week as a staff on how we were going to try. Okay, if Oakland was the team, if we had to do a 1-game playoff against Detroit if we were tied for the division. If we had to go play Baltimore or Anaheim, what are we going to do against these certain teams? It's a little bit easier, when you have a 5-game series, you got a little more of a safety net, if you will. But that one-run game is, that's the game where we broke it down, started breaking that one game, that wild card game, about a month out. And we started going over all of our pitching. Who do we want to set up to be the starter for that game? We knew at that time we had a phenomenal bullpen. We had Greg Holland, as our closer, Wade Davis as the 8th inning, Luke Hochaver, Ryan Matson. These guys were all phenomenal, big league pitchers. And our bullpen, Kelvin Herrera, we were just locked down. So our big issues were the 5th and 6th inning. So we started talking about, okay, what are we going to do if we get into a situation in a one-game playoff where it's a do or die? We must win. How are we going to try to maintain that, and what's going to give us the best opportunity? And there was extensive conversations about, how we were going to handle the pitching staff in those situations.
Ned, kind of piggybacking off of that thought, what's the toughest part from a manager's perspective in a one-game wild card? Like, what's the toughest part to manage in that one-game wild card?
Well, I mean, it of course, you can't see into the future, and you just have to manage the game. And going into it, for me, the Royals hadn't been in the playoffs in 25 years. So for me, I didn't feel like, the wild card for me now, was a playoff scenario. I felt like we had to win that game to get into a 5-game series. That would feel like the playoffs for me. So, I think we kind of put a little extra added pressure. But again, it's like everything else. You manage the game. The players go out and play, and you hopefully put them all in a position to, be successful. But you line up your bullpen with your matchups. And, so, there's times where, if you got to go to the bullpen, in the 3rd inning or the 4th inning, you do it, because you just never know what the situation's going to be. It's a one-game shootout, and you take your best shot and have your best arm out there and your strongest arm out there every time you have, and try to take advantage of every matchup, because there's no tomorrow.
Ned Yost is our guest here on 101 ESPN. Hey, Ned, I wanted to ask you about the way that you handled Danny Duffy in that playoff run, because the Cardinals have a somewhat similar situation to what you had right now with Jack Flaherty. Jack Flaherty's been hurt for a decent portion of this season. He's back now, and they're using him out of the bullpen. But it's only been about a week and a half prior to the playoffs where they're kind of feeling out, okay, what's he like coming out of the bullpen? What were those conversations like for you guys with Danny Duffy going into the 2014 postseason when you did end up using him a bit out of the bullpen? And how do you think the Cardinals this year could maybe lean on some of that experience?
Well, the experience is great, but you need to make sure that, he's ready to go. So I think that, these last couple of games will be a little bit of an audition for him because, once you set that roster for the wild card game, it's a one-game roster. So, you win, you move on, you can set the roster again. So if you can see situations or scenarios where he could come into play, then, he'll be on that roster. But, you just have to make sure that he can handle those types of situations because, we got and I'm not saying we got into trouble, but in the wild card game in 2014, we started talking, again, like we said before, about the 5th and 6th inning. We had Yordano Ventura that was a starter, and we kept talking, well, what if we get in the 6th inning and we need a gap to get us to our bullpen? Would Ventura be that guy? He's throwing 98 miles an hour with a tremendous curveball, nice change. Even though he's been a starter, he can come in and, pitch a one-inning relief if we need be. And so we talked about it, and it made more sense. And we went into the last game of the year, and we could see he was a starter because we were trying to win or trying to tie the division. Detroit had a one-game lead. If they lost and we won, we'd have to play a one-game playoff. But after 50 pitches, we could see that Detroit had won. We took him out of the ball game. So we had him set up for a one-inning a one-inning relief spot going into the wild card game, and sure enough, the situation arose, and we brought him in, and he gave up a 3-run homer. It didn't work out. And we got booed, or I take it back. I got booed, because we did that. But that was a situation that was well thought out, with a bunch of well-experienced baseball men, and we talked about it forever. The situation just didn't work out. So, hopefully in these situations that, he's comfortable coming in, in a relief spot and can handle that situation. And if he can, that's sure a nice arm to have out there in that bullpen.
Ned, final one from me. You've seen a lot of Adam Wainwright and Yadier Molina in your career, managing the Kansas City Royals and the Milwaukee Brewers. How critical have those two been, in your opinion, to this Cardinals run, just having them a part of this roster?
Just huge. I mean, Adam Wainwright has always been a favorite of mine. Just to watch him pitch, he's just so good. And Yadier Molina and Salvador Perez are the two best catchers. I guess you got to throw Pudge Rodriguez in there too, but they're the three best catchers that I've ever seen. You have so much respect for Yadi and what he does back there. And coincidence or no coincidence, and I believe this, that the reason that there was such a pretty big turnaround for John Lester was Yadier Molina, helping him on that staff. Once they got Lester over there, he's been really, really, strong for you guys here, the last month or so. And I just think that Yadi has had a big input in that. But, those two guys are indispensable for me. And when you think of the Cardinals, I mean, you think of Yadi, you think of Goldsmith, you think of Arenado, and you think of Wainwright, and that's that organization. Those are the guys that lead the rest of those guys to victory every single day.
Ned, my final question that I've got for you, and thanks so much for the time today. The Royals in 2014 had momentum coming out of that wild card game. It was an all-timer, that game in and of itself, and then you guys used that, and it carried you, and you guys played incredibly well, and you ended up in the World Series as a result. What is that momentum like coming off of the wild card game going into, for you guys, the ALDS, or potentially for the Cardinals going into the NLDS? How much can that help them going into that series?
It can help them a ton. And, and I'm going to be really frank and honest with you. I've never really understood momentum. Momentum changes from pitch to pitch. So, people want to say, boy, we got momentum going into this. And yeah, you feel good because you've got a little bit of a streak going. But for us, I think the thing that was so amazing is that we had a young group of kids that in the 8th inning of the wild card game, all of a sudden the switch flipped, and the switch, thinking that they were good, thinking that they could win, to knowing in their heart that they were good and knowing in their heart that they could win. So it was more of a belief in a group, in each other, I think, as well as the momentum going into it that carried us on an 8-0 run in the playoffs. And they never looked back from that point.
He's Ned Yost, former Royals and Brewers manager. He managed the Royals in 2014 in that wild card game. He's a 2015 World Series champion, and now you hear him on MLB Network Radio. Ned, sincerely appreciate the time today. Thanks so much for hopping on with us. All the best to you, and we'll talk again soon.
All right, you guys enjoy the run.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
same to you. That's Ned Yost joining us here on 101 ESPN, one of my favorite baseball guys in the business. He's fantastic, all-around good human being. And I wanted to talk about that last point that he made there, Alex, about his team realized that they are good. I wonder if the Cardinals, we know now, actually, the Cardinals' moment for that was against the Reds. The Cardinals' moment was when Nolan Arenado hit his 30th home run, and after the game, I think it was Miles Mikolas who came out and said, this is the type of win that can turn things around for us. And it ended up being exactly that type of win, and they won 17 straight after that. I think the Cardinals have that feel now. I don't think that the Royals did prior to the AL wildcard game back in 2014. Then they did, and then boom, it carried them into, like Ned Yost said, Game 7 of the World Series. I think the Cardinals know they're good. And I gave the numbers yesterday comparing the Cardinals' offense over the last 2 months to what we have seen from the Dodgers' offense over the last 2 months. The Cardinals are going to go into that wild card game against the Dodgers believing they're every bit as good as the Dodgers are. They're going to go into, if they get there, the NLDS against the Giants believing they're as good as the Giants are, and they've won 4 out of 6 this year against the Giants. So I do think that is something that is meaningful when you are not looking at it as David versus Goliath, but rather as your peer team, I think that's super important. And I think the Cardinals are there now. I do not believe that they were there as recently as a month and a half ago.
It's invincibility. It's what it feels like. And I go back, and again, I hate doing this, but it's just the reference I can go off of. It's that Blues team. When they went into that series against the Winnipeg Jets, the Jets were a team that was looked at as a Stanley Cup favorite, but the Blues felt like they were untouchable, and they win that series. I think the Cardinals have now felt like they are untouchable because they found every different way to win a baseball game in that 17-game stretch. And when you go into the series against the Dodgers or the Giants in the wildcard game, you're sitting there going, they got nothing on us because they didn't go through the adversity that we just went through. And to your point where they felt like they were the best and they could do it, I would go to that Dodgers series. And I know that they lost 2 in that game, but you just beat a team that was on a streak that everyone thought was a World Series favorite. You beat 2 of 4 in those games. And that's where it was like, okay, we're untouchable. And then look at where the streak went from there.
And to your point on the way that they won and how many different ways they won during that 17-game streak, there will not be a scenario that takes place in that wild card game that they have not won in that specific script, right? Whether they get down early, they know we can come back. We've done it before. We will do it again. If they get up early and then give up a lead and then have to come back again late, they've done that in this streak. If they've got it in the 8th inning, come up with a big-time hit against a big-time reliever, they've done that. Anything that presents itself to them in the wild card game, been there, done that. That is what is so meaningful about that 17-game streak and why it could, in my opinion, I know Ned kind of pushed back a little bit on it. I do think the momentum matters for them, especially because they just went through such a significant streak, and that's going into the wild card game. If they can pull it into that and then get into the NLDS with even more momentum, man, this team is going to be tough to beat at that point in time. 65780 is the Air Comfort Service text line. We're going to be joined by Jim Bowden, former Major League General Manager, coming up in about 15 minutes. But coming up next, questions and answers here on 101 ESPN.
You've got questions. We may have the answers. Maybe? Text now to 65780. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers on 101 ESPN.
With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Jim Bowden, former Major League General Manager, joining us here in about 10 minutes or so. But right now, 65780 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Let's start out with this one. Hey, guys, what do you think about the Super Bowl halftime show that was announced yesterday? Alex, if you missed it, it's going to be Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, and Kendrick Lamar. What do you think about that?
Fix yourself for a minute, though. It's not Snoop Dogg.
I don't even know.
It's Snoop D-O-double-G.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's how you pronounce that name.
That's what the cool hip kids say, like T Drizzle over here.
Jesus, never call yourself T Drizzle. I loved it, man. I'm excited about it. It's something different. You know, like we've had pop stars, we've had rock. When was the last time we've had like rap stars at a Super Bowl halftime? Like, I know they've been a part of it, but they haven't.
I'm trying to think as like the headliner. It's been a minute, man.
And Snoop is in his own world, so like I can't wait to see that. But like Dr. Dre and Eminem, that one's going to be really entertaining. I've heard Eminem concerts are just out of this world, so I'm really excited. It's something different, and I'm pumped for this Super Bowl halftime.
I'm going to be Mr. Buzzkill because I could care less. I don't really care about the Super Bowl halftime.
That's because you play
old
songs.
I don't care who
show.
they could have said. They could have said like, well, they just did The Weeknd, but so that would be bad. They could have said like AJR. I could care less whoever's the halftime. You don't know who AJR is?
Alternative band.
Do you know who AJR is?
Of course, that's the kind of music that I listen to.
Sorry, bad example, I guess.
Sorry, guys.
I just don't really care about the Super Bowl halftime. It's on like in the background, but that's like my time where I'm like getting stuff ready for the second half.
Did you guys see that country music fans are really upset?
Really?
Because they've been snubbed again, they're saying. Because they keep saying, like, country is never, we haven't done this in so long.
You know why?
Don't say it.
Actually, I don't.
This is the first, I'm going through some of the history of the halftime shows. I can't find one that was like a true rap performance. Like, you've seen some hip hop.
Yeah.
Boys to Men was a headliner a while ago, like 25 years ago.
That was so good.
Like 25 years ago, Tanner. It was like before you were born.
I was 6, but I still remember
that they were a headliner.
Tanner wants Tony Bennett and Mel Tormeda.
That'd be good.
Michael Jackson, that's more poppy, but we've seen Diddy, Nelly. That was back in 2004. You probably remember that as the Justin Timberlake, Janet Jackson halftime performance that ended up
remember.
giving us Paul McCartney and the Rolling Stones and Tom Petty Petty the next few years, and Bruce Springsteen. They went all the way in the other direction right after that. But yeah, I'm excited, man. I think this could be a good one. I don't think it's going to be good as, like, I thought Shakira was really good. Beyonce was outstanding.
Wasn't Shakira with J-Lo?
Yes.
Yeah, that one was really good.
The Lady Gaga performance was really good. I enjoyed Katy Perry.
Timberlake
Bruno, I thought
was good.
was awesome. We've had some really good ones in recent years, but
this one's going to be fun, man.
It'll be fun. I don't think it'll be as fun as those. It won't be as entertaining as those ones were, just because those were more performances than I think this will be, but it has the potential to be pretty good.
Are we going to get like old school Eminem, Dr. Dre, you think, or you think it's going to be newer stuff?
Yeah,
like
it's
got to be like
yourself,
real Slim Shady.
Yeah, they'll go back to the early 2000s with some of that stuff for sure.
Awesome.
Kendrick will probably end up doing one song. I bet you the star of the show ends up being Mary J. Blige.
Really?
She'll end up having the performance that everybody's talking about later on.
I don't know if I could tell you more than 2 Mary J. Blige songs.
I don't know who that is, so I'll beat you on that one.
You weren't even in the competition there, T-Bone.
By the way, Prince was also outstanding. He was very good as well. 65780 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Let's get to this one from the 618. Hey guys, LaShawn McCoy announced that he's retiring. Is he a Hall of Famer in your mind? Alex, do you view LaShawn McCoy as being a Hall of Famer?
I don't think so. But I mean, to be frank with you, I'm not sure if I know how high up he is on the statistics and running backs, but like, of course, everyone goes to Super Bowls first and hasn't won a Super Bowl. But then you're thinking of like, is he high up there on the touchdown chart in terms of running backs or yards? Because I hear the name and it just doesn't pop like, oh yeah, he's a Hall of Famer.
I think he kind of, I don't know, he's tough because I think he might be, because he's 5th all time in rushing yards. He's been an All-Pro. He's been to Pro Bowls. I think he might. I know he doesn't have the Super Bowl. I think there's a chance he could be a Hall of Famer. I don't know if I would put him in, but I think he does have a legitimate shot to get in.
Here's the thing about LaShawn McCoy's Hall of Fame candidacy that's interesting to me. If he's not going to get in, who are you putting in among running backs of the last 15, 20 years? Because LaShawn McCoy, since 2000, is 5th in the NFL in rushing yardage. There's just not a whole lot of running backs that are going to be worthy of entering the Pro Football Hall of Fame in the next 15, 20 years if you're not going with him. I mean, Adrian Peterson is the one that immediately comes to mind for me. He'll get in. But after him, the list is pretty short on guys that are guaranteed Hall of Famers from this era of football at that specific position. And I don't think you just want to completely eliminate a spot from the Hall of Fame. So
it's kind of the changing of the game, though, right? Like, the running backs just aren't used like they were prior to that, to where like they were instant Hall of Famers. The only other guy that I can think of after Adrian Peterson would be Frank Gore.
And you know my thoughts on him. He's not a Hall of Famer.
He hates Frank Gore.
Best of all time.
Frank Gore. Frank Gore Friday, never forget, BK.
He's going to get in. He does not deserve.
Frank Gore Friday.
By the way, if LaShawn McCoy does get in, you know whose case goes up significantly for being a Hall of Famer?
Steven
Jackson. And it should, frankly, for what he did, it should.
Steven Jackson it has 400 more rushing yards in his career than LaShawn McCoy. So he's going to be worthy of getting into the Hall of Fame. His candidacy will be boosted if LaShawn McCoy gets serious consideration. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, I thought Stalter said something really interesting the other day about how the Cardinals compared to the Brewers, not just for this postseason, but for the next 3 years. We'll do that coming up in about 15 minutes or so. But coming up next, Jim Bowden, former MLB general manager, now host on SiriusXM, joins us here on 101 ESPN.
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
That's Alex Ferrario. He's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Right now, we are very happy to go back out to the Brown and Crouppen Celebrity Line to be joined by former Major League General Manager, current host for SiriusXM MLB. He's Jim Bowden joining us here on the show. Jim, we always enjoy having you on. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing very well, especially after this recent Cardinals run where they won 17 straight. They've won 18 out of 19. What was your perspective on this run, this stretch that we've seen from the Cardinals, Jim?
Well, it's been incredible, and what really stands out to me is what a great defensive team this St. Louis Cardinal team is. And I asked John Mozeliak on Sunday on our front office show if this was the best defensive team that he's ever had while he's been in St. Louis, and he didn't completely commit to it, but he certainly said it was one of the best. That really stands out to me when you go back and you watch the tape and the digital of all of those 17 wins. What stands out is how many singles and doubles are just taken away by that great defense. I mean, we all knew how great Arenado and Goldschmidt are on the corners and Molina behind the plate, but, O'Neill won his Gold Glove last year. Bader's going to win his Gold Glove this year. And then you got Carlson, Edmonds, Sosa, all of them above average defenders as well. So the defense is so exciting, and I got to tell you, if you're the Dodgers or Giants, you don't want to be playing this Cardinal team in a one-game playoff. Not with Adam Wainwright on the mound, and not with the defense that's going to be behind him.
Jim, I was going to ask you that because the Dodgers and Giants, they basically have been playing in an identical second half of the season, both fighting for that NL West spot. Do you really think that both of these teams are truly fighting to avoid the Cardinals? Because, the Dodgers on paper have a fascinating lineup, and Max Scherzer on the mound.
Well, they're fighting so they don't have to play a one-game wild card, obviously, and the Giants with a two-game lead, obviously, in the driver's seat. And both of these teams, as you mentioned, identical records since July 15th. That's how elite they are. Now, if I were the Cardinals, I would prefer to play the Dodgers in a one-game wild card than I would play them in a five-game series because their rotation is so deep that, if you've got Scherzer and Kershaw and Buehler and Urias, that is a really deep rotation to have to go against in a five-game series. I would much rather go against the Giants in a five-game series if I were them. So I think the two-game advantage right now the Giants have and the Dodgers are a good thing for St. Louis. Look, they're going to go. St. Louis is going to go into the wild card game with the knowledge that they're as good as any team in baseball right now, and they've proven that on the field. We've seen it happen. And the one thing that and I've been covering the postseason my whole life. And the one thing that is always obvious to me is the great defensive teams normally are the teams that are left standing, and St. Louis has that attribute. I don't think there's any question whether you look at the analytics or you view with your own eyeballs, it is just really special. So they're a real threat. I don't know how the rotation's going to do if they make it to a 7-game series, to be honest. So I think it's going to be tough to get all the way to the World Series, but this is a team that's capable of winning the wild card and are capable of upsetting the Giants in a 5-game series.
Jim, how do you compare this offense to the other offenses that they could potentially face, specifically the Giants and the Dodgers? Because we went through some of the numbers since August 1st. It honestly surprised me, even as being around this team all of this time, that the Cardinals' offense has been better since August 1st than the Dodgers. But how do you compare those two and add into the Giants to that group as well?
Yeah, so when I view offense and lineups in the postseason, it's different than the regular season, right? And the reason it's different in the regular season you're facing all kinds of pitching, and you're facing pitching on teams that are in last place, teams that are in third place. You've got a big variety of pitchers. When you get to the postseason, you're facing normally the best that's out there. So what I care about is what lineups can hit the best pitching. And the Cardinals lineup can hit the best pitching. And it's not just Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado anymore. You can put Tyler O'Neill in that same conversation, and I'm going to put Dylan Carlson there too, who's finally living up to what I thought he would do this year. I thought he would be Rookie of the Year. He's not going to be, but he certainly looks like it here down the stretch, which, like Jared Kelenic of Seattle, they're finally living up to what we knew they were going to be. This Cardinal team, they can hit good pitching. So I absolutely feel offensively, all three of the teams that you're discussing, the Dodgers, Giants, and Cardinals, can all hit this type of pitching. The one thing I like about the Dodgers is the top of the lineup, because in a short series where pitching and defense normally rules, Mookie Betts and Trey Turner can beat you on the bases by stealing bags. You're in a 2-2 game, they get the big lead, then the pitcher gets rattled, he's got to throw over 6 times, and he steals a base, and there's a bloop, and there's a run, and they end up winning that game. Corey Seager is completely locked in right now, finally healthy, but he's locked in. So that top of the lineup, when he stacks Betts, Seager, and Turner, and that's the order that Dave Roberts has been using recently, that's a really tough lineup to face in October in playoff games. The rest of the lineup, though, I'll take St. Louis's middle. I'll take Arenado, Goldie, and O'Neill against any of the middle of the lineup, any of them right now, right here, and feel really good about it. So St. Louis is a threat. In a one-game wild card, anything can happen. We get it. But I will tell you, with Wainwright on the mound and the team locked in as they are, they have as good a chance, whether they play the Dodgers or the Giants, of winning that game.
Jim, I know the focus right now is the wild card and seeing what the Cardinals can do this season. But from a GM's perspective, you're always looking forward. And this offense, for how great it's been these last couple of months, it did hit a dry spell in the early portion of the season. Has the offense done enough in the last couple of months from a GM's mindset to say, you know what, this is something that I think we stick with going into next season?
Oh, yeah, I think you stick with this team. I mean, look, if I was John Mozeliak looking at this team, I'm just focusing on the starting pitching. I just want to figure out how can I get this starting pitching better. He did a good job of trading for the senior citizens in Lester and Happ. They certainly got the job done. But this is an older rotation. It helps you in October because these are veteran guys that have been there, done that. But that's the one area that I would be focused on if I were Mo. That being said, would I love to put Corey Seager at shortstop on this team? Yeah, I'd love to have that shortstop bat. But Sosa's been really impressive, and I'm not sure, you're not going to have all that much money to spend to add to the payroll. And so I think what I did have dollar-wise, I think I'd focus more on rotation than I would adding another bat. But as a former GM, would you like to have the left-handed hitting Seager in there? Yeah, you would like, and he's a Cardinal-type player.
Jim, does the defense that this team has, does that change at all the kind of pitcher that you're going to be looking at going into the offseason? Because we saw a lot of the young guys that had the walk issues early this year. It didn't go well for them. They didn't use the defense that was behind them, and the guys that they've brought in since then have done that, and we've seen the results that have followed. Are the types of pitchers that you're going to be looking at a little different in St. Louis than they would be elsewhere if you didn't have this kind of a defense behind them?
I mean, I don't think there's any question that, you want guys that throw strikes and guys that put the ball in play, guys with high ground ball rates, obviously. Guys that can keep the ball in the ballpark, of course you like that. But normally, though, really what you want is you want the studs that miss bats and throw strikes, right? I mean, in the real world, you want the Corbin Burns, you want the Max Scherzer, you want the Garrett Cole. I mean, those are the guys that GM is always going to chase. But when you're building the middle to the back of the rotation, you certainly want guys that throw strikes, especially with this team. You throw strikes and you have command, and that the key is the command of your pitches, not just the control and throwing strike. It's being able to have Molina not have to move his glove at all, be able to hit the spots, use both sides of the plate, get it in play. Yeah, those are the kind of pitchers that you want in the middle of your back of your rotation.
As a follow-up to that, Jim, if I put you in John Mozeliak's chair and I said, hey, you've got $25 million to spend this offseason on the pitching, and you can divvy that up however you want. You can give it to multiple guys. You can give it to one guy. What is the guy or the guys that you would potentially be targeting early on in the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. I really can't give you the answer. $25 million isn't enough to get me a Max Scherzer. So I may want to see what I can get. Justin Verlander coming back from Tommy John. Is there a way I can afford to do Verlander and Kevin Gausman both? Is that possible? Or do I need to make the trade somewhere to get the other arm? I'm really, when you talk about that kind of money, it takes a lot of time and effort to really figure out who you can target, who's affordable. I haven't gone down that path yet.
Sure.
But Verlander would be the type of guy, like you're built to win now. And I want to win now while Goldie and Arenado are in their prime, and you've got all those young kids, Neil with a breakout year. Carlson's just going to keep getting better. Tommy Edman's a great player. So, I want to take advantage of it. So I don't really want to make another Matthew Liberatore trade and get younger arms. I want proven guys that can sit there and help this team get better right away. That's how the Cubs did it. That, you look at Tampa Bay, that's how they did it actually. It's not from, most of them aren't from within. They're actually from outside. So, you never get enough pitching. We all know that. The one exciting thing when John Mozeliak goes to this offseason is you don't really have to have any questions whatsoever. You re-sign Waino, and then you just keep adding to the pitching.
Jim, a lot of criticism for Mike Schilt throughout this season from fans here in St. Louis. And with this new run, do you feel like that criticism has changed a little bit in terms of him being a long-term manager for the Cardinals?
Look, all the Cardinals do is win, and the St. Louis fan base has such high expectations. But when things don't go well, St. Louis fans want the GM and the manager fired. And when things go well, then they like them. That's how it works in St. Louis, and that's okay. Because the baseball fans there have the passion. They want to win, and that's the expectations. I don't know how you could criticize the job that Mike Schilt has done. Now, if you want to sit there and pick on managers, I promise you all 30 markets are unhappy with their manager most of the time because they left the pitcher in too long, or they took him out too soon, or they flip-flopped the wrong guy in the 6th, 7th spot in the lineup. When you don't win, we go back and look and say, well, we should have done this, we could have done that, we should have done that. Mike Schilt has done an amazing job with St. Louis. This is a very respectful man who is fundamentally sound. Reminds me a lot of Ronnie Gardenhire when he managed the Twins, because this team is fundamentally sound. You won't find Mike Schilt in the clubhouse with the players, right? That's their place. You got to go into his office. But he knows how to empower Paul Goldschmidt. He knows how to empower Arenado to run that clubhouse and believes in them. Players love playing for him. So, look, the criticism, I get it. It's always going to be there in St. Louis. Bottom line is, look where they were at the beginning of August with a 4% chance of making the postseason, and look at where they are today. You've got to give Mike Schilt credit.
Final question that I've got for Jim Bowden joining us here on 101 ESPN. Jim, the Cardinals are very likely going to see Max Scherzer in the wild card game, and he is one of the guys that if you talk to any Cardinals fan that's out on the street and ask them what they want the Cardinals to do this offseason, some of them will tell you get one of those big bats. A lot of them will tell you bring Max Scherzer home. What kind of money do you think he's going to command this offseason?
Well, put your seatbelt on, and if you're listening in the car, please don't drive off the road. He's going to become the first $50 million a year player in baseball history. He's going to get $50 a year times 3. He's going to get $150 million. Scott Boras is going to make sure that record is broken. Now, he probably has to pitch well in the wild card game as well. That last start lost him the Cy Young Award to Corbin Burns, to be honest. But Mighty Max has had another Cy Young caliber season, and he's going to get $50 million a year. Look, if Trevor Bauer got $45 a year on a short-term deal, Mighty Max is getting $50, and he's going to beat it. So he'll be the first guy to ever do it in the history of our sport. So if the Cardinals only have 25 to spend, like you said, they can only afford to get half a Scherzer.
Wow. They've got $60 million coming off of the books. Maybe they just slide that Max Scherzer's away. I'd be surprised by it, but that is a lot of money. He's worth it. If anybody's worth it, it is him. Jim, we always appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much for hopping on with us today. All the best to you. Enjoy this playoff run.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
you
Jim.
got it. That's Jim Bowden joining us here on 101 ESPN. Wow.
So, don't hope for Max Scherzer, Cards fans. If that man is going to be $50 million a year for how he's 39?
No, he's 37.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Oh, okay. Still.
He's going to finish pitching when he is what Waino is now.
No, he's
on
never,
that next contract.
He is Tom Brady. He's never going to finish pitching. He's just going to keep going.
Bowden made my mouth drop when he mentioned like $25 million. Maybe you could try and get like Gossman and Verlander, and then he just slides in the $50 million. Wow.
Actually, I don't want Gossman or Verlander. If you're going after pitcher, I want Robbie Ray.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about that coming up next. There was an article from Jeff Passan over the last couple of days talking about what some of these players could get in the offseason. Alex, you like Robbie Ray.
Yeah.
Tanner, you like Max Scherzer. I know I have said that I like Nick Castellanos. Boys, if you thought $50 million was a lot, wait till you hear what the rest of the market could look like. We'll tell you about it next on 101 ESPN.
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Well, put your seatbelt on, and if you're listening in the car, please don't drive off the road. He's going to become the first $50 million a year player in baseball history. He's going to get $50 a year times 3.
That's what Jim Bowden had to say to us just moments ago about what you're going to see this offseason for Max Scherzer, who the Cardinals are likely going to face in the wild card game next Wednesday. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex, I wanted to hear that, and I wanted to ask about that because Jeff Passan of ESPN.com started out his offseason preview with a piece earlier this week, breaking down who the top free agents are, who's going to get what, who the guys at the top of the market are. Well, he said in his piece he expects Max Scherzer to command more than the 2 years, $85 million deal that Trevor Bauer signed last offseason. So when I heard that from Bowden, when you hear the $50 million per season, it hits you like a ton of bricks. And you're like, really? $50 million per year for a player? But then when you compare it to what you just saw last year from Trevor Bauer, who got $42.5 million per season, I guess it does make a lot of sense. That being said, do you think that completely takes the Cardinals out of the running in your mind, Alex, for Max Scherzer this offseason?
Look, I think the Cardinals were already out of the running for Max Scherzer when he went to the Dodgers because he stated that the team he was traded to at the deadline is the team that he wanted to stay with for the rest of his career. So I thought they were already out of it. But yeah, if we're talking $50 million a year for Max Scherzer, there's no way that the Cardinals can pull that off because your roster is going to have more than just one player turnover. Like you can't go into this upcoming offseason, and that's why I asked Jim that as well. Like, do you stick with this roster? And he said, yeah, you stick with it, but you fix the pitching. But you don't fix the pitching with just one move. You're going to have to fix the bullpen, right? We've talked about bringing back Luis Garcia because you can't just come back and say, well, we'll go with Latino Heat again next season. No, you need more weapons in there. You do need depth, and I do still believe you're going to need help on the offensive side. So, yeah, if it's $50 million for Max Scherzer, I think there's one team that can get it done, and it's the team that he's with right now, the Dodgers.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, and I'm kind of with you. I was kind of on the mindset of, if he comes here, it'd be nice, but he's not taking a team-friendly deal, especially if he's getting 3 by 50.
Yeah, jeez.
And that's also, you mentioned, too, you want to add more players than just one, because you look at the Cardinals, that's what they did this past offseason. They added the one guy, and they brought back 2 veterans. And I don't think that's what they want to do heading into next season. And that's why I think when you look at it, when we were talking about, well, how do you upgrade the offense? Well, you go get Seager and give him $30 million a year. That's why I kind of looked at it and said, I don't know if they're going to do that either. I think they're going to try and take somewhat of the Giants route, look for those cheap pitching options that are on the market that can pitch with this defense and kind of allocate those funds. Make 4, 5, 6 different changes that don't cost as much.
So let's talk about the top of the market, because Jeff Passan also had notes on a few other guys that we've talked about as well. He views Carlos Correa and Corey Seager as the top of the market this offseason. Those are the 2 guys that, according to him, most of the people around the league view as the top of the market. He sees Correa getting around $200 million, potentially more than that in total.
I saw a report today that Detroit's a favorite because of A.J. Hinch.
Yeah, we talked about that previously. I don't remember who we had on, but somebody connected those two because of A.J. Hinch as well. And by the way, A.J. Hinch will be joining us on Monday, so excited to have A.J. Hinch back on the show. And also Jeff Passan said that he believes Corey Seager is viewed by most as the most talented player in this class. So not necessarily the best, but most talented. Of course, there are the injury questions, but if Correa is going to get $200 million and Seager is viewed as more talented than him, I would imagine Seager's going to get something similar, if not exceeding what Correa is going to get. So that's a lot of money for those 2 guys as well, but we knew that. Robbie Ray, name that. Was it you that mentioned Robbie Ray?
Yeah, that's what I just said in the previous break I won.
Robbie Ray is expected to get, according to Jeff Passan, more than $100 million this offseason. Alex, does that change your view of Robbie Ray?
How old is he?
He's what, 30? Yeah, 30 years old.
Oh, yeah, because I was thinking give him a 5-year deal, but that makes me nervous. So, yeah, for $100 million, where you're probably talking, 2 or 3 years? Yeah, I might.
Probably 4.
You think 4? I don't know, man. I still think I would want him, but that's a lot of money. $100 million.
He pitched 30 innings 2 years ago, 20 innings last year. Yeah, I know Arizona, it was a shortened season.
It's pretty terrible.
Arizona basically gave him up for a bag of balls because he was so bad.
He had one good year in Arizona where he was a sub-3 and nearly a sub-3 ERA.
He's been a replacement level starting pitcher for the vast majority of his career. I'm not giving that dude $100 million.
No. And you're paying for basically one season, which, again, we were talking about that about Luis Garcia. You're going to be paying half of a season. Yeah, I'm out on that now.
Yeah, and I don't think you want to give him that kind of deal because then he becomes your elite lefty in your rotation. I think that's how the Cardinals view Matthew Liberatore, and he'll be cost controlled. That's why I think they'd be out on Robbie Ray, too.
He says that people on the market view Nick Castellanos as the best pure bat available, and the only thing that is keeping him away from Tier 1 is his defense, but this year that's not as much of an issue because he's going to be available to all 30 teams, with the DH likely going into order next year. He's got 2 years left, $34 million on his current deal with the Reds that he's likely to opt out of. He's 30 years old. You guys know I've talked a lot about Nick Castellanos and how much I think his bat could help this lineup. If he's going to end up getting $20 million per season, probably around $100 million as well, that's another guy that I think you could probably cross off the Cardinals list too.
What is Carlos Rondon from the White Sox? Is he a free agent?
Yes, he is. He has had some injury issues late in this season. But he's considered to be in the same group with like JD Martinez, Clayton Kershaw, Nick Castellanos. He's a Tier 2 free agent according to Jeff Passan.
Here's the thing with the starting pitchers, though. Like, we can go through this list, and I know there's a Tier 3 that you wanted to get to,
yes.
BK.
Those are the guys that I think are going to be interesting to the Cardinals.
But, like, why are we, if we're talking about starting pitchers, we've already talked about the fact that you're basically going after one guy for one spot because the rest of the guys are in place, and you have 4 guys competing for that one spot. So if you bring in a free agent, nobody else is going to be competing for a spot.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Unless they make a trade, I mean, maybe they deal from within,
Move
right?
Miles Michaelis possibly, but who's going to take that contract?
I don't know, but whether it be Michaelis or somebody else, there are options for them if they wanted to go that route, or maybe they don't end up looking at Alex Reyes as a starter. Maybe they decide, you know what, he's a bullpen arm for us because of the walk issues. And because we don't think he can go deep into games, and we like the idea of adding an Anthony DeSclafani, for example.
But does that get to the point then where Alex Reyes wants to be traded away because he wants to be in the rotation?
I think he's only got, 1, maybe 2 years left on his contract, so I don't think it would probably be something that they would allow.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, unless he says, trade me, I don't want to be here.
Yeah. It very rarely happens with guys on their pre-arb deals in baseball. Yeah, he's got 2 years left after this year, so I'd be surprised by it, but it's possible. I mean, you run that risk, certainly. But some of the guys that I do think could be interesting from this list from Jeff Passan, I just gave you kind of the sticker shock, right? Oh my God, $50 million for Max Scherzer, $100 million for Robbie Ray, $200 million for Correa or Seager. It's a ton of money that you're talking about, more than $20 million per year for Castellanos or JD Martinez. The guys that I do think are interesting as potential options for the Cardinals, these are the guys that are in Tier 3. So you're just below the top 2 tiers. Michael Conforto, he has had a very bad year this year for the New York Mets. But in his career, he's been a really good hitter basically at every point in his career. He's a fine defender, but he's not a great guy out there. He's probably a DH/corner outfield option for you next year. He's somebody that I would be interested in this Tier 3. The 2 guys that really interest me, Anthony DeSclafani, who's had a great season this year for San Francisco. He's 31 years old, and John Gray, the pitcher that we talked about leading into the trade deadline. He's right around 30 as well, and he has had some pretty good years in Colorado despite pitching at Coors Field. Those are 2 of the guys in that third tier type of range that I think could be really interesting on the open market for the Cardinals if they're looking for pitchers.
Yeah, and I'd love both of those guys. A little bit more John Gray, I think, than DeSclafani. If I'm not mistaken, Scalfani's a lefty, right?
Righty.
Okay, so yeah, I think because they're both righties, I would prefer John Gray a little bit more. But again, it comes back to the point where, and I understand Jim Bowden's point of like strengthen your weakness, get more pitching. I just don't know how you can convince a guy to come here unless you do make a trade and say, yeah, you're going to be a part of this rotation, but we also have all of these guys fighting for a spot as well.
I think of those 2, I think I would rather have John Gray just because he's pitched in one of the toughest ballpark, and he's had good numbers there. When you look at DeSclafani, he's kind of had one of those where he was okay with the Reds, but I saw him there, and I kind of saw the downside of DeSclafani. Now we're seeing the upside, but he's at a very pitcher-friendly park, which is what the Cardinals park is.
I was about to say, you're seeing right now what it could potentially look like in St. Louis, maybe even to a greater degree because you got better defense here in St. Louis.
Yeah, so I get that, but I know just looking at his passes a little bit, what would give the advantage to me to John Gray?
I think one thing that is important to keep in mind, and you are absolutely right on this, Alex. When you look at the Cardinals rotation right now, what we are watching from Dakota Hudson changes, in my mind, the need for a pitcher next year. Mm-hmm. Dakota Hudson has become less of a question mark for me. Miles Michaelis has changed the calculus a bit as well. You go into next season with those two guys firmly entrenched into your rotation, along with Waino and along with Flaherty. That's 4 spots left in. If you think Matthew Liberatore is ready, and the last month or two of his season would seemingly suggest that he is, there's your 5.
Right.
And if you think Alex Reyes is deserving of fighting for a rotation spot, there's a 6.
Well, and then Jordan Hicks.
Jake Woodford is an option for you in the rotation. There's your 7th. And then you've got Johan Oviedo, and maybe Zach Thompson is able to take his game to another level. You mentioned Jordan Hicks. I just don't buy it.
I don't as well, but there's something, when there's smoke, there's fire, and you don't send him to Memphis and then Memphis start him in a game if you don't view him as a starter.
Can I give my theory on what's going on there?
Is it tinfoil?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
We only do tinfoil.
I think this is pretty simple. I think they want him on a schedule. I think they want him on a regimen. He's only going one inning typically, maybe a little more than an inning at most. So I think they just want him to get scheduled, regimented work. And the way to do that is on a starter schedule.
Okay.
So I don't think this is about them lengthening him out. And maybe they try to do it, but I view him as a lottery ticket for the rotation, much more so than a guy like Alex Reyes or Liberatore or Woodford or Oviedo. Those are guys I think that are all way ahead of him on the depth chart right now.
For me to put a bow on this in terms of pitchers, I would much rather go into next season and bring back a guy like a John Lester or a Jay Happ who is okay with whatever role you're going to throw at him and makes it an internal competition rather than sign somebody and say, you're the guy, and then everyone else miss out on that competition, because competition's good for teams.
He's Alex Ferrario, that's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in 15 minutes or so, we'll talk to Eddie Olchuk, 16-year NHL veteran, now Blackhawks TV analyst. Want to ask him about what he expects Brandon Saad to add to the Blues, and what are the Blackhawks going to be this year? We've talked a lot about the Blues, the Central Division, getting back into that. The Blackhawks had a huge offseason. We'll talk to him about what the expectations are for the Blackhawks in about 15 minutes or so. But coming up next, my least favorite time of the week. It's time for our football pick'em draft. We'll give you our 3 picks for the weekend coming up next on 101 ESPN.
We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Oh boy, here we go. Here we go again. It is my least favorite time of the week, but last week it went well for me. I was 2-1 on the week, as was Tanner Hendrickson. Alex Ferrario went 1-2, which means that he gets the last pick in our football pick'em draft. We have 9 games, as we do each and every week. All of us will have 3 games over the weekend, 5 NFL games, 4 college football games that are slated for us. I had the best record last week, which means that I get to pick first in this week's football pick'em draft.
Did we decide on the punishment?
Yeah, you're falling through
jumping through a table,
right? Yeah.
So we'll do that next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, whenever you're ready to, you can pay off your bet whenever.
Let my mouth heal.
All right, so I'll take the second pick this week. Tanner, what would you like? The first or the third pick?
Well, because Alex wants the first, I'll take the first overall pick.
All right, and Alex, that means you get the third and fourth pick. Tanner, who are you taking with the number 1 overall pick this week, man?
All right, number 1 overall, I'm going to take the Browns -2 at the Vikings. I know the Vikings just won, but you know what? Kirk Cousins, still overrated, still a bad football team, so give me the Cleveland Browns, -2.
Feels like a loss for T-Bone already. I love it.
All right, so for my first pick, I am going to go with a game that I am pretty confident in, and I don't know that I should be. Ole Miss on the road taking on Alabama. Alabama is a 14.5-point favorite at home. I'm taking Ole Miss plus the 14.5. That is a lot of points. I'm going to go with Ole Miss, who I think is an underrated team going into Alabama. Alabama's offense has not been as good as you would expect this year. Bryce Young's been solid, but he is not throwing the ball deep. Ole Miss can keep up with him. I'm going to go Ole Miss plus the 14.5.
I like that one as well. I was really wanting that one, so I'm a little disappointed that didn't fall to me. But with that being said, I'm going to take 49ers -2.5, taking on the Seahawks at home. Although I did just see that George Kittle is possibly not playing in this one.
He's always hurt, man.
I still don't have any faith in Seattle's offense, so I'm gonna go see San Francisco -2.5.
You're up again.
Oh my God, I'm up again. No, I'm not used to this. Oof. Oh my gosh. You know what?
What?
I'm gonna go Notre Dame +1.5. We'll go that upset there. That's a pretty close one.
Boys, I kind of like Cincy.
I kind of like Cincy too, but
I was going to go Cincy with my next pick.
You know what? Notre Dame, you're not going to sway me on this one.
No,
Notre Dame's at home.
Hey, you're taking them. You can have them, man.
Notre Dame's at home. I like that +1.5, so I'll take ND.
All right, so I've got one underdog on the week. I'm taking my first favorite of the week. I'm going to the NFL. It's a Monday Night Football game between the Raiders and the Chargers in LA.
Raiders!
And I'm going with the Chargers minus the 3 points. I think the Chargers are one of the 3 to 4 best teams in the AFC. Raiders have been really good this year, but how they're winning is with the deep ball from Derek Carr. The Chargers defense takes away the deep ball. So I'm going to take the Chargers minus the 3 points. I think they win this one by 10 plus. Chargers at home win big.
All right. Now, I always
sucks.
feel like I have to have someone that's who's not favored, so I'm going to go with it. Arkansas +18 at Georgia.
You're taking it. Yes.
18 seems like a lot, and I really like that Arkansas football team.
God,
I don't think they're going to win, but I'll take them at +18.
I was really worried that was going to come back to me.
I don't know about that one, Tanner. That one, that one smells bad. That one smells like loss.
That's just because you farted over there. It ain't the pick.
Alex,
You
you're
do
up
have
next,
2
buddy.
losses on this one already, T-Bone. All right, so I'm staying the hell away from Mizzou and Tennessee, so it comes down to the Cardinals and Rams or the Panthers and Cowboys. Both -4s. Cowboys and Rams favorites, both home. I got a favorite. I got an underdog.
Do it.
I got to go Rams here.
Okay.
I got to go Rams -4. They're home. They've been playing like the best team in the NFC this season. Cardinals had a little bit of a scare against the Jaguars, although they came back. I'm going to go Rams -4.
All right, so there are 2 games remaining. The Panthers are taking on the Cowboys in Dallas. Dallas is a 4-point home favorite in that one. Tennessee is traveling to Missouri, where the Tigers are a 2.5-point road favorite. Some places they're up to 3. We've got it at 2.5 when we wrote this down, so that's what we're going with. I hate both of these games. Hate them. Absolutely hate them. The Panthers, I think, are one of the more underrated, sneaky, decent teams in the NFL this season. Great weapons on the outside, a quarterback that's playing above his head right now, and a defense that is fast as hell. But they're without Christian McCaffrey right now. They just lost J.C. Horn, one of the best young corners in the NFL, to what appeared to be a pretty serious ankle injury. The Cowboys are really good offensively. I'm going to take the Cowboys going up against a depleted secondary with the Panthers, minus the 4 points at home. I like the Cowboys to win 7+.
My final one, I think I'm going to go with Tennessee +2.5 since it's the only one. Give me Tennessee. I could score a touchdown on Mizzou's running defense. My goodness. So give me Tennessee +2.5. If this was 7.5, I'd probably take it. So give me Tennessee. That's how confident I am in them.
Oof. All right. Tennessee plus the 2.5. So Tanner's picks are in, Alex's picks are in, and my picks are in. Here's what we've got. Tanner has the Browns -2 points. He has the Arkansas Razorbacks +18. I don't know about that one.
Bad choice, dude.
And Tennessee +2.5. So Tennessee has to either lose by 2 or fewer or win that game.
No BK smelling dew, but that is a victory right there.
Alex has the 49ers -2.5. Notre Dame +1.5. And the Rams -4. I have Ole Miss +14.5, the Chargers -3, and the Cowboys -4 points. We do have a little bit of news to pass along for you guys as well. According to Derek Gould of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Adam Wainwright and the St. Louis Cardinals have agreed officially on a deal for his return in 2022. News story coming to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch shortly. That what I would imagine that is what the press conference will be coming up at 2 o'clock. So the Cardinals have called for a 2 o'clock press conference. We knew that previously. Derek Gould adding to the story, confirming that the Adam Wainwright and the St. Louis Cardinals have agreed on a deal for his return in 2022. This was always expected. Once he said he was coming back, there was no doubt about it. This time around, Cardinals were going to get it done with both Yadier Molina and Waino. So now they can focus on what